bit of a flavour of what is to come over the weekend. A quietish weekend of rugby, but nevertheless, Alan Quinlan, good morning to you.
How are you?
Good, thanks. Yeah, Simon Zebo is back. It's a 1-year deal. We were talking to Ronan O'Gara about it and a few other bits and pieces earlier on. He wasn't so sure whether it's a temporary measure or not. What are you thinking?
I think it's, he's the kind of player that would excite any team to have him back involved with because of his ability and that bit of X factor and that off the cuff stuff that he can do, and he's finishing and stuff like that. But I suppose I didn't think before it happened that, Munster were there was a need to get him, given the back three players that Munster have, Mike Haley, Matt Gallagher, Shane Daly, Liam Coombs, Calvin Nash, all these guys who've probably come into the scene the last couple of years. But to have someone like Zebo coming back is and to actually have the RFU funding it is good for Munster. I think he's a great player. I love that he plays with a smile on his face, and what he can do is second to none. It's a lot of what he can do is what a lot of players can't seem to do, and that's just do stuff off the cuff and play with a natural flair and brilliance.
It kicks off the 15 debate now in a big way for Ireland, doesn't it? We asked Raj about it earlier. He went for Keenan. He said on form he's got to be in there. Who are you picking if you had a team tomorrow? To pick a team tomorrow for Ireland, who's at 15? Both are available.
Hugo Keenan is at 15 because of the way he's played, and he's backed that up with performances for Leinster as well. I think he was outstanding for Ireland. But to have a little bit more depth there, I think you imagine, Adrian, if Hugo Keenan was injured in the morning, who goes in full back? Whose experience of playing there? Who's
it's been Larmour, Conway, like Stockdale at times, I think.
And how have they all worked out?
Look at absolutely.
Well, that's the problem. There's no doubt there's talented players there, but out and out full backs. He's an out and out full back who can play in the wing or possibly at outside centre if needed. But there is no out and out standout players, and that's why Hugo Keenan was a winger for Leinster, with a very good footballer who's taken the role brilliantly. So he adds more depth there, and I think that was probably the whole reasoning behind he was available. With what's going on in France, and they're having to reduce the number of overseas players and bring through more young French players. I think it limits a little bit in the options in all the top 14 clubs, unless they have their marquee signings, and I suppose a lot of them have a lot of overseas players. So it kind of reduced it a little bit, the opportunity, and I'm sure he wants to get home, and it's co-funded. So there's a chance here for him. It feels like it's a make or break year as to what happens with Simon Zebo. Personally, the contract, I'm sure, is reduced from what he would have been on in France, and he was available and was a contract put together for him. So he plays well with Munster, gets into that Munster team, gets on the Irish team, and shows people what he can do again. Well, then, that's the opportunity and the incentive for him to get a contract to probably, of a couple of years going forward at the end of this year. So I think it's a good move for both. I think Munster are getting a player that they probably couldn't have funded themselves because of their budget and players they already have in that position. And it gives more depth to that full-back position in Ireland. So you couldn't rule out Simon Zebo, coming back, hitting the ground running, and being involved with Ireland and playing for Ireland again, because he's such a super talented player.
I wonder, does it lessen, like a lot of chat about that the area they really need to bolster is in the tight five. Does it lessen the chance now that they might do that? Would that be pretty much, could potentially wrap up their business?
Well, it's not that's probably one of the hardest positions as a tight head, in particular. If you were talking about signing tight heads and world-class players at that level, they're hard to come by. They're expensive, and as I said to you on Monday, or said at the start of the week, there's a couple of young Irish qualified players there that hopefully will come through in Salano and Knox. So it's an area that obviously you'd love to go out and sign loads of players and have unlimited budget, but it's just something that can't be done, and they're hard to get. And you can't, if you go and get an international tight head, and even if it's only for a short-term scenario, it's cost you massive money, and then to get someone for a year or two to try and not hinder the players coming through, it's too much of an issue. So every team, the vast majority of teams need strengthening in certain areas, and they've got to make do with what they have and hope that the younger players come through. So that's the hope with Munster, and I don't think I'm not sure. I'm not privy to what the rest of their business is for the rest of the season or signings for next season. But I'd imagine that that's probably that they won't be signing anymore. I don't know for sure.
Yeah. Speaking of like tying down world class tight head props, Tyke Furlong is the one marquee player for Ireland at the minute who's yet to sign on the dotted line. It seems unthinkable that, given the importance of him, that wouldn't happen.
Yeah, it does. I think it does seem unthinkable. I think, again, nobody knows what's going on here. Maybe sometimes these contracts take a little bit of time, but ideally you'd want to get them done a few months before the end of the season. Historically, they would have been all kind of tied up even pre-Christmas or January at the latest. And he would be... Look, I doubt if anything will happen here. I'm sure it's the nuts and bolts of the contract, and he can command probably he can probably at this stage be the top earner in Ireland because of his importance and because of his quality. And he will go on another Lions tour, and I think his form that he's shown since he's come back has been outstanding. But it would be unthinkable if he was to go anywhere. But I doubt it very much if that will happen.
Yeah.
Or be allowed to happen.
Be allowed to happen is right. The Rainbow Cup looks like it's gone ahead. They're introducing some new law variations. So one, there's going to be a captain's challenge where a team can challenge the referee for try scoring moments or acts of foul play up to 75 minutes, and then anything in the last 5 minutes. The defending team goal line dropout, that, you know, we'll see how that goes in certain circumstances. And then maybe the most interesting one, the red card for the player that gets sent off. They are off and they can't come back on, but that team is allowed to reintroduce a substitute 20 minutes afterwards. What are you thinking?
What do you think? What I'm thinking? I think a red card is a red card. I don't agree with that one. Like, what's the point? It's they should just increase the length of the sin bin or something like that. Give someone a red card and you can bring on another player after 20 minutes is something I think is I don't agree with it.
Yeah.
I find it hard to see how that will work. If a player gets sent off, the whole thing to kind of highlight the fact of foul play or the reasons for being sent off should affect the whole team as well, and that whole decision that the player makes. Sometimes, to be fair, and we've seen a lot of it in the last number of years, challenges in the air, the high shots, some of the collisions. There's been so much debate about the high tackle sanctions and all that kind of stuff, and some are reckless, some are intentional, but the vast majority are I wouldn't say intentional, but they're accidental is the wrong word. They are reckless for sure, but there's been lots of debates about these headshots, and when I think about it, I think maybe if it was deemed accidental, but to the letter of the law, one of these collisions, i.e. in the air or in a tackle situation, if it was deemed accidental, I probably could accept the fact that, you know, an accidental act in a tackle or a collision in the air, it has big ramifications for a team when you go down for 40 to 14 men, particularly if it happens early in the first half or early in the game. Obviously, intentional stuff. If you're reckless and you tackle someone with force and with real intent to kind of hurt the opposition player, and you get a red card for it, your team should suffer as well, because the coaches picked you, and to incentivize. I'd be worried that this is a case now of, well, look, because we're gone in a situation where, and I know it's frustrated a lot of people that watch rugby in the last number of years, that there has been a lot of cards and there has been a lot of debate. And I've been kind of banging the drum about changing tackle techniques, coaches drumming this into the players, finding different ways, getting lower in the tackle height, no charging, going off your feet into breakdowns, driving more than diving off your feet, and all that kind of stuff. That now we're going to say, well, sure, look, what's the worst case scenario if you get caught and if you hit someone in the jaw with your shoulder or your high tackle or you charge into a ruck, it's 20 minutes. We'll be back to 15 men then. We can rally the troops for those 20 minutes, manage the game and get back to 15 players.
Which is exactly the opposite message that I think they're trying to generally send out, oddly.
Yeah, and I do understand. I think, look, it's a trial situation, but I don't know, like if you get a red card as a red card. Now, some of them are wrong and some of them are very debatable. I do understand that. So maybe if there was a situation where the TMO reviews it afterwards, the red card is given and he comes back to the referee and said, look, we've watched this numerous times and we feel that it was accidental. There was some mitigation there. And okay, we're okay with the red card, but we feel now that the whole team shouldn't be punished for something that's accidental. So we're going to allow a player come back on the field after 20 minutes from that red card. Maybe something like that. But look, it's a trial situation and, you know, there'll be for and against in any of these decisions and any of these changes. And, you know, we have to try some things for sure. And I may be wrong, but I think, you know, when I just think of a red card is a red card. And the only kind of movement I would do in it is if it was accidental and the referee had to give the red regarding letter of the law and all that kind of stuff, fair enough. But maybe if it was accidental and you could get the a different player back on the field and it wouldn't hinder the team overall.
Yeah, go on.
Well, it's I presume that the thinking behind it, Alan, is that games just become a write-off after a red card on some occasions.
Yeah, for sure. And I understand that. I said it at the start on. I think, you know, if a player gets sent off, particularly early in a game, the chances of that team winning, particularly when there's two kind of evenly matched teams playing, the team with more numbers in the field, the 15 players, usually wins that game. Of course, it can happen that the other way around as well. So it's trying to make... I can see the logic behind it, but I would have an issue with it on if there's someone who's very cynical and they do something that's really, really reckless and a player is injured and there's a lot of force in a tackle. And if they're red carded and the team should suffer as well for that situation. If it's accidental and there's mitigation there, well, then the team shouldn't suffer. So we should differentiate between the two. And I think that's where I would accept that scenario because, you know, I think if, as I said, if it's intentional and stupid and the opposition player is injured, the team should suffer as well.
Just finally, we've about a minute here on the Ireland-France game tomorrow, 2:15 kickoff, and obviously Ireland looking to go 2 from 2, but a big step up from the game last weekend.
Yeah, it is a big step up for the Ireland women tomorrow. I think it maybe shows the strength and depth of the French setup. You know, they're semi-professional, but they've made 8 changes from their team that they selected in round 1, who beat France 53-0. Maybe they've loads of strength and depth here. I don't think they're underestimating Ireland, but I'd say they fancy their chances coming to Dublin, making those changes and winning the game. It's hard to know where the team are. Were Wales poor last week or were Ireland brilliant? There was a mixture of both. Ireland were brilliant at times in that first half. Baby Parsons, what a star. I was chatting to her early in the week and doing another event, and I was saying that any of the men's teams would be mad to sign her because she's phenomenal. She's a superstar. Dorothy Wall was brilliant as well in my old position as a 6. Hannah Tyrrell at fly half. So they have a lot of quality. They have a lot of players who are brilliant rugby players, and I think putting it together has been the key for them. They've had 20 training camps since October, since they played Italy. So I think there's a lot of positive signs there, and fingers crossed they can do it against France tomorrow. They're a very powerful side. And the challenge, of course, is when you're playing a team that's semi-pro. So the vast majority of these French players are full-time rugby players, and that's always a difficulty and a challenge. And Ireland, until the women's team, or whether they will or not, go full-time themselves, that's always going to be a challenge. But you feel it's a different game for sure. But it's on home soil, and if they get enough of quality ball to their backline, I think they could surprise the French.
Yeah, we should all be watching 2:15 tomorrow. Best of luck to them. Quiddy, thanks a million.
Cheers, lads. Thanks.
Thanks a lot. It's gone at 9:15 on this Friday morning. You're watching OTB AM.